The human trader's mission Jarek sat inside his old rusted spaceship, staring at the message glowing on the screen. Deliver the cargo. Do not ask questions. Payment, 50,000 credits. No return. That was it. No names. No details. Just coordinates and the tag. Live biological transport. Jarek had done many jobs before. Legal, illegal. Some he didn't talk about. But 50,000 credits? That was more than he'd earned in years. Enough to fix his ship. Maybe even retire. So without asking anything, he accepted. When he arrived at the drop zone, he expected crates or maybe small animals. But what stood waiting on the dusty platform shocked him. A woman. No, not fully human. Her skin was a soft shade of violet, and her silver hair fell down her back like silk. She held the hand of a small child. A girl, maybe 5 or 6, with the same skin, same hair, and big glowing blue eyes full of fear. The guard handed Jarek a scanner. Cargo's tagged. They're healthy. Widow and her kid. Got sold by debt. Don't look so surprised. Jarek looked at the 2 aliens. The woman kept her eyes on the ground. The child peeked up at him, then hid behind her mother's long robe. They're people, Jarek said, his voice low. They're product, the guard replied. Same as any other. Take 'em or walk. Jarek hesitated. For a moment he wanted to say no. This wasn't cargo. This was slavery. But then he remembered his broken engine, his empty food supply, and the debt collector who said next time they'd take his ship. He sighed. Fine, get them on board. Inside the ship, Jarek locked the door to the cargo bay. He didn't want to hear their voices, didn't want to feel anything. He just had to deliver them. That was the job. But as the engines warmed up, a soft knock came from the door. He ignored it. Another knock. Softer. With a growl, he opened the door just a crack. The little girl stood there, barefoot, holding something out. It was a tiny flower. Withered, but real. For you, she said in a quiet voice. You brought us food. Jarek blinked. I didn't. My mama said you gave us bread, she said. That means you're kind. He didn't know what to say. He hadn't done it out of kindness. He had just thrown them some leftover rations so they wouldn't faint before delivery. The girl looked up at him. Her big eyes blinked slowly. Will the new buyer hurt us less than the last one? The words hit Jarek like a punch. He didn't answer. He couldn't. The girl waited, then bowed slightly and walked away. He stood frozen for a long time. That night, Jarek sat in the cockpit, watching the stars pass by. His ship flew on autopilot toward the buyer's planet. But he couldn't sleep. He pulled up the buyer's profile. It was locked behind encrypted code, but he'd seen the name before. Vuxin, a rich merchant known for buying rare creatures and slaves. Rumors said he liked the young ones, especially the ones who cried. Jarek felt sick. He opened the internal cameras. The woman and her daughter lay curled up in a corner of the cargo bay. No blankets, just each other. The mother's arms wrapped tight around the child, her eyes wide, open, watching the door. Jarek stared. What am I doing, he thought. He reached to turn off the screen, but then the girl moved in her sleep. She whispered something. His translator picked it up. Papa. Jarek's heart stopped. She had whispered, it like a dream, like she didn't remember her real father, or maybe like she wanted to believe someone could be one again. He turned off the screen, sat back. He couldn't do it, couldn't sell them, couldn't send them to Vuxin, but turning back meant no money. No repairs, no escape from debt. It could mean prison or death. Still, he looked out the window. Stars blinked like tiny eyes watching him judging. He sighed and made his decision. I'm not a good man, he whispered to himself. But maybe I can do one good thing. He turned off autopilot and set a new course. Away from the buyer. Deal with darkness. The ship drifted through deep space, silent except for the soft hum of the engine. Jarek's hands gripped the controls tightly. He had changed the route. Now he was flying away from the buyer, away from the credits, away from the safe path. But danger still followed. He hadn't deleted the tracking signal. Vuxin, the man who bought cargo like the widow and her daughter, would know something was wrong soon. Jarek needed to act fast. He needed a plan. The first step was to find somewhere to hide. He opened a secret channel and called an old contact, Dren, a smuggler who worked near the Ardo Belt. Dren was shady but knew things. He owed Jarek a favor. After a few seconds, Dren's wrinkled alien face appeared on the screen. "Jarek, you still alive?" Dren laughed. "I thought you were dead or in prison." "I need a favor," Jarek said quickly. "I need a place to lay low for a few hours. Somewhere quiet. Off the radar." Dren's eyes narrowed. "What did you do?" Jarek hesitated. "Let's just say, I didn't complete a delivery." Dren sighed. "You really picked the wrong cargo, didn't you?" A few hours later, Jarek landed on a small station hidden inside a hollow asteroid. It looked like a junkyard. Rusted ships, broken robots, and piles of metal filled the landing bay. As the ship touched down, Jarek turned to the back room. The alien woman and her child sat huddled together. He unlocked the door. "You can come out now," he said. The mother stood slowly, shielding her daughter behind her. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "Why are we still alive?" "I changed my mind," Jarek said simply. The woman narrowed her eyes. "No one changes their mind in this galaxy, not without a reason." The child peeked out again. "Are you taking us somewhere safe, mister?" Jarek's jaw tightened. "I'm trying." They stepped onto the station together. Dren met them at the dock, looking them up and down. "This your cargo?" he asked with a smirk. "They're under my protection now," Jarek said firmly. Dren whistled. "You know Vuxin put a bounty on your head, right? 10,000 credits. Alive or dead?" The woman tensed. The child gripped Jarek's arm. He didn't pull away. "Can you help or not?" Jarek asked. Dren shrugged. "I can fix your ship and give you fuel. But if you want real protection, you'll need to make a deal with the shadow market." Jarek frowned. "That place is worse than Vuxin." "Maybe," Dren said, walking toward the garage, "but they hate him more than they hate you." While the ship was being repaired, Jarek found a quiet corner of the station to think. The woman sat beside him silently. "You don't trust me," he said. "I don't trust anyone," she replied. "Not after what's happened to us." He nodded. "I don't blame you." There was silence for a while. Then she spoke. "My name is Sarai. My daughter's name is Rinya." Jarek looked at her. "Thank you for telling me. I told you because Rinya calls you Papa in her sleep," she said. "She hasn't said that word in years." Jarek didn't know what to say. His throat felt tight. "I'm not her father," he finally whispered. Sarai turned to him. "No. But right now, you're the only one acting like one." Just then, a sharp alarm rang through the station. Jarek jumped to his feet. Dren's voice came through the comms. "Jarek, a scout ship just landed. Vuxin's men. You've got 5 minutes before they breach the bay." Jarek ran to the docking room. Sarai followed, holding Rinya close. Dren tossed Jarek a small plasma pistol. "One weapon, one chance. You sure about this path?" Jarek looked at Sarai and Rinya. "I'm done selling people," he said. "Now I fight for them." Dren gave a half smile. "Then let's show Vuxin what happens when you push a human too far." The door hissed open. 2 armed thugs stormed inside, scanning the room. "Where's the traitor?" one growled. Jarek stepped out from behind a stack of crates. Gun raised. "I'm right here." The alien aimed his weapon. "Give us the widow and the child. You might live." Sarai appeared behind them without a sound. Her hands glowed softly with a strange alien energy. Before the thugs could react, she lifted her palm. A shockwave of blue light burst out, throwing them against the wall. Jarek stared. "You had powers?" he asked. Sarai's eyes glowed faintly. "I told you. I protect my daughter. The escape. The hallway echoed with the sound of boots. More of Vuxen's men had landed. Jarek slammed the bay door shut and sealed it with a manual lock. Sarai stood behind him, breathing hard. The blue glow in her hands faded, and she stumbled. You, all right? Jarek asked, steadying her. I'll manage, she said. But I can't do that again. Not for a while. Rinya clung to her mother's side, eyes wide. She didn't cry. She just stared at Jarek, waiting, trusting. Dren's voice crackled through the communicator again. You've got 3 more incoming from the East Passage. If you're going to, run. Now's the time. Jarek looked at the 2 frightened figures before him. Then he looked at his ship. No time for repairs, he said. We leave now. He grabbed Sarai's hand, surprising her, and pulled her and Rinya into the corridor. Behind them, doors were being cut open, sparks flew. Voices shouted in a language Rinya didn't understand. But fear didn't need translation. They ran through narrow halls. Dren had shown Jarek a shortcut once, leading to a smuggler's hatch that opened directly into space. If they could reach it, they could blast off and jump to light speed, but the path was dark and full of traps. I remember this place, Jarek muttered. Barely. Rinya slipped. Jarek picked her up without thinking and carried her in his arms. You don't have to do this, Sarai said, panting beside him. I already did, Jarek replied. They reached a locked door at the end of a rusty tunnel. A keypad blinked red. Dren! Jarek shouted into his comm. Open the emergency hatch now, Dren answered, coughing. They got to the control room. I'm locked out, you'll have to override it. Jarek cursed. He dropped to his knees and began opening the control panel with shaking hands. Behind them, footsteps echoed louder. Voices called out. A blast hit. The wall above them. Metal sparked and groaned. Jarek worked faster. Wires, codes. He barely remembered the trick. Then, click. The light turned green. The door opened. He shoved Sarai and Rinya through, then followed. They entered the tiny launch. Pod, it was barely big enough for 3 people. Dust and broken switches covered the controls, but the core engine blinked softly. Alive. Jarek jumped into the pilot's seat. Hold on to something. Sarai wrapped her arms around Rinya. Jarek hit the launch button. The pod jolted, shook, then burst from the side of the asteroid like a bullet. Behind them, the station shrunk into a dot. Jarek didn't smile yet. He saw it. Vuxen's main ship. It hovered near the asteroid, and the moment they appeared, its guns turned toward them. Brace! Jarek shouted. The enemy ship fired. The pod rocked violently. A bolt hit the rear stabilizer. Jarek fought the controls, gritting his teeth. We're losing speed, Sarai shouted. Jarek checked the nav system. Only 1 jump was left in the drive. 1 chance. He turned to Sarai. Hold Rinya tight, this might hurt. She nodded, eyes filled with fear, but also trust. Jarek activated the hyperjump. Light swallowed the pod. The stars stretched. The ship screamed. Then, silence. They had jumped. The pod drifted into an empty region of space. No planets nearby. No ships, just quiet stars and endless black. Jarek let out a long breath, his hands trembled. We made it, he said. Rinya peeked over Sarai's shoulder. Are we safe now? Jarek looked at her, then Sarai. No. But we're far enough that we can breathe again. Sarai nodded. Where are we? Jarek pointed at the glowing screen. Somewhere quiet. There's a moon nearby with breathable air. We'll land there, hide for a bit, plan our next move. Later that night, under a glowing alien sky, they sat around a tiny fire on the moon's surface. The pod had just enough supplies, blankets, a few ration packs, and a water filter. Jarek had fixed the outer door to make the pod into a shelter. Rinya snuggled into a blanket next to Jarek, already half asleep. Sarai watched silently from the other side of the fire. You didn't have to run, she said softly. You could have just left us. I tried, Jarek admitted. I really tried to follow the mission. Just finish the job, get paid. Sarai tilted her head. Then why didn't you? Jarek looked at the sleeping child beside him. "She gave me a flower," he said, and asked if the new buyer would hurt her less. Sarai's expression changed, gentle, then sad. Jarek continued, "I've seen many bad things. Done a few too. But that moment, I just couldn't be part of it anymore." Sarai stood and walked over. She sat beside him, looking at Rinya. She used to laugh all the time. Before the war. Before we lost. "Everything." Jarek listened quietly. "She doesn't laugh much anymore," Sarai said. "But when you carried her..." She smiled. Jarek looked surprised. "She did." "Yes," Sarai whispered. "That means something." They sat there, under the alien sky, while the child slept between them. And though they didn't say it, something had changed. They were no longer stranger, passenger, and pilot. They were beginning to become something else. Something like family. Hiding among the stars. The next day, the small moon was quiet. Too quiet. No cities. No signals. Just rocks, cold winds, and skies filled with endless stars. It was the kind of place people forgot, and that made it the perfect place to hide. Jarek stood outside the pod, scanning the horizon with a cracked pair of binoculars. No movement, no heat signatures. He let out a breath. Good. No one had followed them. Inside the pod, Sarai was cooking something over a small heat stone. It wasn't much, just dry food rations and crushed herbs she had collected nearby. Rinya sat next to her, drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. Jarek stepped in, dusting off his boots. Still no sign of trouble? Sarai looked up. "How long can we stay here?" "Maybe a week," Jarek said. "The pod has limited power. After that, we'll need to find something better." Sarai nodded. "Then let's not waste time." They spent the next few days setting up camp. Jarek used scrap from the pod to make a solar shield, hiding their heat from any scanners. He dug a small trench around the pod in case it rained acid, which moons sometimes did. He taught Rinya how to help, giving her small tasks, holding tools, checking wires, even handing him bolts. She loved it. "You're really good at this," Jarek told her as she tightened a screw. "I like fixing things," Rinya beamed. "Are you a fixer?" "I'm a trader," Jarek smiled. "But maybe now I'm both." Sarai watched from a distance, arms crossed. She didn't speak much, but every now and then, Jarek caught her watching them. Her face was unreadable. That night they sat around the fire again. Rinya was fast asleep in a blanket curled between them. "She's changing," Sarai said suddenly. Jarek looked over. "What do you mean?" She laughs again. Talks more. Plays. Jarek smiled. "She's strong." "She was quiet for months before you," Sarai said. "No laughter. No joy. Now, she even dreams." Jarek stared into the fire. "I'm no hero, Sarai." "I didn't say you were," she replied. "But you didn't leave. And that's more than most." Later, when Sarai was asleep, Jarek walked alone outside the camp. He looked up at the stars, remembering Earth. He remembered his wife. Her smile. The way she held his hand during storms. And he remembered the explosion that took her. The war that ended everything. He had run ever since. Sold scrap. Delivered cargo. Took jobs he hated. Anything to survive. But now, there was a child who looked at him like he mattered. A woman who saw him as something more than a traitor. Something he had buried deep inside. A protector. The next morning, Jarek tried to send a signal. Not to call for help, but to check if anyone was searching for them. He powered up the scanner. Static. Then, blip. A faint pulse. He froze. Someone had entered the system. A ship. Not close yet. But moving slowly, quietly, like it didn't want to be seen. He turned off the scanner and ran back to the pod. "Pack everything," Jarek said, voice sharp. Sarai stood up fast. What happened? We've got a hunter ship in the system. Could be Vuxen's men, could be someone worse. Where do we go? She asked. Jarek looked down at Rinya, still sleepy. We can't outrun them in the pod, but I've got one idea. He pointed toward a ridge far off in the distance. There's a mining cave I saw from the sky. If we can hide there, maybe the ship passes without scanning us. Sarai didn't argue. Within minutes, they packed food, blankets, and a power cell. Jarek carried Rinya in his arms again. She laid her head on his shoulder without protest. The hike was hard. The path was rocky. The sun was low and red, casting long shadows behind them. But finally they reached the cave. It was wide, with deep cracks running far into the mountain. Old mining tools were scattered everywhere, proof someone had once lived here. But now, it was empty. Jarek set up the heat stone. Sarai placed Rinya in the corner, wrapping her tight. Then they sat and waited. An hour passed. Then 2. Then, a sound. A ship overhead. Low, quiet, searching. The roar of engines echoed across the rocks. Sarai grabbed Jarek's hand. He held still, barely breathing. Rinya opened one eye but didn't cry. The ship circled, then it moved on. Jarek waited another hour before stepping outside. The ship was gone. He returned to the cave. We're safe, for now. Sarai didn't speak. Instead, she stepped forward and hugged him. It shocked him. She had never touched him before, but in that 1 second, Jarek realized something important. He wasn't just hiding anymore. He was protecting something worth dying for. Past that haunts, the cave was cold and dark. Outside, the moon's light shone only a little through the cracks. But inside, by the soft blue glow of the heat stone, a different kind of warmth had begun to grow. One not from fire, but from something deeper. They had been in hiding for 3 days now. Jarek sat against the rock wall, staring at nothing. He hadn't slept much. Sarai sat across from him, sharpening an old mining blade. Rinya slept soundly between them, wrapped in the same gray blanket Jarek had once used as a tarp in his ship. She's not afraid anymore, Sarai said softly. Jarek nodded. She trusts you. She trusts you too, Sarai added. He didn't reply. Instead, he pulled a small silver coin from his pocket. It was smooth and old, with a symbol of Earth on one side, a memory from a place that barely existed anymore. Sarai watched the way his fingers moved over the coin, slow and thoughtful. Was that your home? Jarek didn't look up. Yes, Earth, before it burned. He didn't talk much about his past. Not to anyone. But now, sitting with Sarai in the dark, surrounded by quiet and stars and a child who laughed again, something inside him cracked open. She was a teacher, Jarek said suddenly. My wife, Emily. She taught young kids, just like Rinya. She had the warmest laugh and the sharpest tongue. Sarai listened without speaking. She died during the lunar conflict. We were evacuating a group of children. A rogue blast hit the carrier. I tried to pull her out. I couldn't. His hand clenched the coin tighter. After that, I left Earth, took whatever jobs paid. Tried to forget, but I never did. Sarai lowered her eyes. You lost your world. I did, Jarek said. And I thought I didn't care about anything anymore. Until now. He looked over at Rinya. She reminds me of what I've forgotten. That there's still something left in me. Something that wants to protect. Sarai set the blade down. I know that feeling. We lost our planet too. Not from war, but from greed. My people were sold piece by piece. First the land, then the skies, then the people. Jarek met her gaze. Rinya was born in a cage, she continued. She never saw our home, never felt sunlight. I promised myself I'd keep her alive no matter what. Jarek's voice was soft. You've done more than that. She laughs. She sings now. Sarai almost smiled. You helped with that. The next morning, Jarek woke to the smell of something strange. Food. He sat up quickly. Sarai stood near the fire with a small steaming pot. The smell was unlike anything from his world, sweet, earthy, and warm. "What's that?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "Urine root," she replied. "Found some last night near the ridge. It's good for the body and the mind." He sat beside her. "You're full of surprises." She handed him a bowl. "You're full of guilt." Jarek paused, then laughed once quietly. "Fair enough." He sipped the broth. It was thick and warm, comforting. "Thank you," he said. Later that day, Jarek and Rinya climbed higher into the rocky hills. He showed her how to use old scanning tools to read the terrain. She listened carefully, mimicking his actions. "This machine talks to rocks?" she asked. "In a way," he smiled. "It listens for hidden things, like secrets?" She grinned. He nodded. "Exactly." She leaned close and whispered to the scanner. "We're hiding, okay? Don't tell." Jarek laughed louder than he had in years. As they returned to the cave, Rinya skipped ahead. Jarek walked beside Sarai. "She's strong," he said. "Like you." Sarai looked down at the girl. "She gets her heart from someone else." He raised a brow. "She sees you as more than just the man who saved her," Sarai said. "She sees you as home." Jarek stopped walking for a moment. Home. That word hadn't meant anything to him in so long. That night, the stars were brighter than ever. Rinya fell asleep in Jarek's lap as he sat by the heat stone. Sarai sat close beside him. He looked down at the sleeping girl, then back at Sarai. "I know this can't last forever. Vuxin won't stop." Sarai nodded. "We'll fight. When the time comes." Jarek looked at her. "Not just run?" "No," she said firmly. "Not anymore. We've run enough." He took a deep breath. "Then we fight. Together." Sarai looked at him for a long time. Then, for the first time, she rested her head on his shoulder. Neither of them spoke again that night. They didn't need to, because the past had hurt them, but the future, they would face it together. A family fights back. A cold wind blew across the rocky ridge. Jarek crouched low behind a jagged boulder, one hand gripping his old plasma pistol, the other resting on the stone to steady his breathing. Beside him, Sarai's eyes glowed faintly. Her palms sparked with quiet blue energy. The time for hiding was over. They had been found. That morning, the scanner had picked up the signal. Vuxin's personal warship. Bigger, faster, deadlier than anything Jarek could outrun. This wasn't a scout, this was a full hunting party. "They're here," Jarek had said, "and this time they've brought everything." He knew they wouldn't be taken alive, not this time. So he made a decision. They would fight. While Rinya napped inside the cave, Jarek and Sarai prepared the area. They set up traps using old mining wires and power coils. Jarek rigged a few signal flares to explode if touched. Sarai carved strange symbols into rocks, marks from her world, meant to confuse minds and slow movement. They worked without speaking much, both focused, both calm, but when their hands brushed while setting a motion sensor, they paused. Jarek looked at her. "Are you scared?" She nodded slightly. "But I won't run." He smiled. "Good. I'd hate to fight alone." By nightfall, the first landing pod touched down on the far side of the ridge. 6 figures stepped out, heavily, armed, red armor gleaming in the firelight. One of them sniffed the air and growled. Life forms, nearby. Jarek watched them from above through a cracked visor. "Let's give them a welcome." He pressed a button. Boom! A small trap exploded near the lead soldier, sending him flying backward into the dirt. Screams followed. Another trap went off. Flames. Smoke. Confusion. Sarai stepped out from the shadows and raised her hand. A glowing wave of energy swept across the ground, slamming 2 enemies against the rocks. One didn't get up. Jarek moved fast, shooting with clean, sharp aim. 1 down, 2 down. But more came. Rinya woke to the sounds of fighting. She peeked from behind a rock, eyes wide, clutching a small blanket. She saw her mother in battle, glowing, fearless like a goddess of light, and Jarek shouting, diving, protecting, his back to her, always between her and the danger. She didn't cry. She stood up, grabbed a small comm device Jarek had left near her, and whispered, "I'm okay." Jarek heard her voice in his ear and smiled, even while dodging a blaster bolt. Fight grew harder. Two of Vuxen's elite guards broke through the ridgeline and rushed toward the cave. Sarai screamed and raced after them. But Rinya had already moved. She pressed the small button on the comm. Click. The flare trap hidden near. The cave mouth exploded, throwing the attackers backward. One hit the ground hard, unmoving. The other tried to rise, but Sarai was already there. She didn't hold back. The glow in her body turned white. Her scream split the night air as she released a final burst of raw power. Jarek turned and shielded. His face, when the light faded, both guards were down. Sarai fell to her knees, gasping. Jarek ran to her side. "Sarai, I'm okay," she whispered. "Just tired." He helped her to her feet, supporting her with one arm. The rest of the attackers ran, those few left alive. One shouted into his comms, "Retreat! The woman has weapon-level powers. We need backup." But there would be no backup, because then Dren's old ship, long thought broken, appeared from the sky, firing a single warning shot that lit up the stars. Jarek had sent a signal earlier. A gamble. And it paid off. The attackers fled into their pods. They left as fast as they came. Silence returned to the cave. Jarek, Sarai, and Rinya stood in the quiet, breathing hard. Burn marks on the rocks. Smoke still rising from the ridge. They had done. They had fought back and they had won. That night, Jarek built a new fire. Rinya sat beside him, holding his hand with one and her mother's with the other. "Did we win, Papa?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, little one. We did." Sarai leaned her head on his shoulder. "They'll think twice before coming again." Jarek looked at her. "You were amazing out there." She smiled faintly. "So were you." Rinya giggled. "You're both my heroes." Jarek pulled her close. "You're ours." Later, when the stars were bright again and the moon was quiet once more, Jarek stood on the ridge alone. He looked at the stars. So many. So far. He didn't know where they'd go next, but one thing was clear now. He wasn't alone anymore. They were a family. And together, they were stronger than anything chasing them. More than just cargo, the days after the battle were quiet. Too quiet. The cave felt warmer now. Not because of the fire, but because of the people inside it. Jarek, Sarai, and Rinya moved like a family. No orders, no secrets. Just quiet moments, shared chores and soft laughter echoing off stone walls. But Jarek knew it couldn't last. They had won a battle, not the war. One morning he stood outside looking at the horizon with tired eyes. The scanner he'd repaired beeped in a low rhythm. It had found something. A ship. Not Vuxen's. Not military. A trade vessel. He opened the signal. A voice crackled. Through. "This is Captain Yuna of the Driftwing. We received a distress code from this moon. State your name and situation." Jarek hesitated. Behind him, Rinya played with sticks, building a pretend campfire. Sarai cleaned a cracked water flask nearby, humming an old alien tune. He looked back at the scanner, then pressed the comm button. "This is Captain Jarek Holt. Civilian. I'm with 2 refugees. We were attacked but survived. Requesting safe. Pickup." A long pause. Then, "Coordinates received. Be ready. We arrive in 20 hours. That night, Jarek told them. "I called a ship," he said. "A peaceful one. We can leave this moon." Rinya jumped up. "Are they good people?" "I think so," he said. "At least they're not Vuxens." Sarai didn't look surprised, just quiet. "Where will we go?" "Anywhere," Jarek said. "Somewhere without fear. Somewhere you can be free." Sarai looked down at Rinya, then back at Jarek. And what about you? Jarek hesitated. That depends. On what? On whether you want me to come with you. The next day was silent. Everyone waited. Jarek packed the pod slowly. Sarai helped, folding blankets and wrapping food in cloth. Rinya drew a little picture on the cave wall. A tall man, a glowing woman, and a smiling child standing between them. At the bottom, she wrote one word in rough human script. Home. The ship came at dusk. It was smooth, bright, and shaped like a bird. It landed gently on the far rocks. A woman in silver armor stepped out, flanked by 2 officers. She waved calmly. I'm Captain Yuna, she said. You must be Jarek. Jarek nodded. These are Sarai and Rinya. Yuna knelt before the little girl. Hello, young one. Rinya gave a small wave, half hiding behind her mother. Yuna smiled and stood. You're safe now. We don't deal in people. Just peace. Sarai studied her for a long moment, then gave a short bow. Jarek exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. Inside the driftwing, Rinya stared wide-eyed at the polished walls and glowing lights. She clutched Jarek's hand tightly. Sarai walked beside him, calm but alert. They were led to a small private cabin. Simple, warm, and quiet. This will be your room, Yuna said. We're heading toward the Tellan-free worlds. You'll be safe there, no slavers, no trackers. She paused. And Jarek, the bounty on your head has been wiped. Someone must have spoken for you. Jarek blinked. What? Yuna smirked. You've got friends you don't know about. Then she left. That night, Jarek stood alone by the observation window. Stars passed by like gentle waves. He heard soft footsteps. Sarai appeared beside him. She was barefoot, her silver hair loose. You're still awake, she said. He smiled. Couldn't sleep. Thinking about Earth? Maybe. Or maybe I'm thinking about what comes next. She looked at him, serious but soft. You saved us, Jarek. More than once. You didn't have to. But you did. He looked away. I was supposed to sell you. I almost did. But you didn't, she said. And that's the man my daughter sees. That's the man I trust. Jarek turned toward her, heart pounding. Sarai stepped closer. You are not just a traitor anymore, not just a lost man, he whispered. Then what am I? She reached for his hand. You're part of us now, if you want to be. The next morning, Rinya woke early. She found Jarek and Sarai asleep on the couch, leaning into each other. Peaceful, safe. She giggled and climbed between them, curling up quietly. None of them moved. But Jarek, half awake, smiled. When the ship reached the Tellan-free worlds, they stepped out together, not as trader and cargo, but as a family. The landing crew asked for their names. Sarai gave hers, then looked at Jarek. He hesitated, then said clearly, Jarek Holt, Guardian, Head of Household. The officer raised a brow. Occupation? Jarek looked at Rinya, who stood proudly holding both his and Sarai's hands, and he smiled. Protector.